skills. And then they will come and do an opening statement about why they're here, what's on their heart about this topic of anti-Semitism. And then we will begin the facilitated discussion. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We have some of our Let's Talk About Race committee that's monitoring the chat. And so that we'll try to make sure that we keep the questions in the order in which you offered them. And then at the end with the Q&A, we may be able to show lift our Zoom hands or those types of things. So as we begin, I'm pleased and proud to introduce our panelists for the night, Rabbi Leslie Bergson. I will introduce her first. She is a board certified professional chaplain. She serves as the chaplain for Compassus Hospice and Palliative Care in New Jersey, providing spiritual care for hospice patients and their families. She was ordained by Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in 1995 after 5 years of study in Jerusalem, Los Angeles, and New York. During that time, she served as a student rabbi in South Lake Tahoe, California, Norwalk, Connecticut, and Provincetown, Massachusetts, and as a rabbinic intern for the American Jewish Congress. She's completed units of clinical pastoral education at the UCLA Medical Center and Methodist Hospital of Southern California, served as a mentor in the Interseminary Institute at City of Hope, and volunteered as a community chaplain at UCLA Medical Center, City of Hope, Pomona Valley Hospital and Medical Center, and Parker at Monroe Nursing Care Residence. Prior to her work in medical chaplaincy, Rabbi Bergson was university chaplain and filial director at the Claremont Colleges in Claremont, California. And she also held a monthly pulpit at Congregation Etz Chiam in Ramona, California. So Rabbi Leslie Bergson, we welcome you to our program. Next, we have Rabbi Marc Kline, who serves at Monmouth Reformed Temple and is, he says he's a recovering lawyer who is now a Jewish rabbi. And Rabbi Kline has done justice work and organizing, and he is one of the most brilliant and active minds in any religious tradition that I've known. And so I know that he has great insight and wisdom that he'll share with us. And as he's about to present his portion, I'll explain why I invited him to be a part of this. And it was because of a conversation that he and I had. Our final panelist will be the library's own Linda Hewitt. Linda was at first apprehensive about being on the panel, but in our conversations as we were planning, just some of the thoughts that she has and insights, we thought that they would be really good to help us with the discussion. And so Linda Hewitt, our fearless leader with the library, who we just heard from, she will be our third and final panelist. And then we will open it up for the Q&A, the discussion, and hopefully we will all come away from this program knowing more about the dangers of anti-Semitism, knowing more about where it comes from, how it shows up, all of those things. That's our goal for tonight. So please ask your questions, please put them in the chat. We want everyone to go away from here learning something new so that we all can be different in our operations. So with that, we're about to begin our program. And so I will ask, and I'm gonna put the spotlight on Rabbi Leslie Bergson to begin.
Okay, thank you, Kerwin.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I would like to talk a little bit about that. The topic is what causes anti-Semitism. And I think that answer is different throughout history. And I was just thinking, I had to do a little research too, as to what the history of anti-Semitism is. And I wonder if most people know how long it's been around. But to answer the question of what anti-Semitism is, the definition from the International Holocaust Resource Association is this: anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community installations and religious facilities. That's a lot of big words. But basically, the definition is that anti-Semitism is Jew hatred. And anti-Semitism, the word itself, was not started use of until the end of the 19th century. But the anti-Jewish feelings have been around a whole lot longer, since ancient civilizations. And this is from the Anti-Defamation League. They say that throughout history, anti-Semitism typically surges in times of political or economic uncertainty, as well as rapid social change, often used as a tool of political manipulation or populist anger. And I thought that sounded pretty much like the state of things today. But the fact that Israel did not have a land of its own after the year 70 of a few years later than that, first century, second century of the Common Era, AD. The statelessness, religious differences, and the economic success of Jews have caused a lot of hatred. Even in Egypt, Egyptians recast the Exodus as not as Jews seeking their freedom with the help of God, but rather as the expelling of outcasts. You know, who wants them? In Greek and Roman literature, there's a lot of writings about Jewish dietary laws and circumcision as being bizarre customs, and the celebration of the Sabbath, the seventh day, as a day of rest, was chalked up to laziness. In early Christian times, Jews were blamed for the crucifixion of Jesus, and that is a meme that has gone on for centuries and millennium. And in terms of the early Christians, Pontius Pilate is the one who called for the crucifixion of Jesus, but since the Romans were their rulers, it was pretty hard to blame their overlords for the crucifixion, and so the Jews came in for that blame. In medieval Europe, to skip a few centuries, Jews were barred from owning land and from the artisan guilds. So they were forced to make their living by being merchants and by money lending. These are occupations that were not highly thought of, and Jews were blamed for a lot of the things that went on there. There were, throughout the Middle Ages, there were forced conversions, massacres, and expulsion. And for instance, England in 1290, France in 1394, and Spain in 1492. In more modern times, there was, in 1894, the Dreyfus Affair. Alfred Dreyfus, who was a captain in the French army, was falsely accused of selling military secrets to Germany. He spent a good 10 years in prison. He was championed by the author Émile Zola, not a Jew, who wrote a book about him called J'accuse, I Accuse. And about the same time, in Atlanta, Georgia, Leo Frank, who was the manager of a pencil factory, a young girl was found killed in, I think raped and killed in the factory, and suspicion fell on Leo Frank. He was jailed pending a court case and was lynched in the jail and killed. To go back to the Dreyfus affair, Dreyfus was covered by a journalist, a French journalist called Theodore Herzl. And what Theodore Herzl decided from a non-religious point of view is that Jews needed their own country, and began a movement called Zionism. And so Zionism actually caused Arabs in the Middle East to start opposition to Jews where it had not been there had not been that kind of opposition earlier. One of the most significant things that Christianity has done towards Jewish-Christian relationships happened in 1964. The Second Vatican Council absolved both ancient and modern Jews from the crime of deicide, from being accused of killing Jesus Christ. And since that time, the Catholic Church has made amazing strides in Jewish-Christian relations, and I think has done a lot to mitigate the damage that has been done. My time is up, and I move to the next participant.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bergson. And those of you who are attending, if you have questions or thoughts, things that she said that you want to bring back up, just put it in the chat or make a note of it so that we can make sure that you have your questions answered. Our next speaker panelist guest is a good friend of mine, Rabbi Marc Kline, who one day he gave me a call, and normally when I ask Marc how he's doing, he said, I'm blessed or better than I deserve, but this time he didn't respond that way. And it was because he says, I need help. And so I'll let Marc talk, and then as we do our facilitated dialogue discussion, I'll get into why that conversation struck me so much. But Rabbi Kline, floor is yours. You're muted.
There. Kerwin, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I always love working with the Red Bank Library. It's an amazing institution, as you heard what's going on. Linda, you do a great job there. Rabbi Bergson, it's great to have you as not just a colleague, but my classmate and part of my congregation here. You've given a great history of some of the, I hate to say highlights of anti-Semitism, but for history students, you can read all of that in the book, but it plays out in all sorts of insidious ways. My daughter, Corey, who is actually part of this group, when we were in Florence, South Carolina, in my first congregation, she came home from school. I think she was in 4th grade. And she says, Daddy, I must not be Jewish. And I said, why? And she said, well, I don't have horns and a tail. And they told me at school that if I was Jewish, I would have horns and a tail. Now, here's a 9-year-old person, a young lady, talking with 9-year-olds who understand Jews as having horns and tails. This isn't an adult conversation. This is what kids have learned from their parents. And this is how stereotypes perpetuate. And so, the idea that we control the businesses and the banks, I'd like to know where my share of the dollars are if we're all in charge. Rabbi Bergson, you referenced the charge of deicide and the blood libels. If there's a way to scapegoat a minority population, it's happened to Jews, and it's hatred for the sake of hatred because we are kept outside of society. And we're sort of in no man's land. One of the last people I met in Lexington, Kentucky, before moving here 7.5 years ago, said, "Wait, you're Jewish? I thought you were white." Now, if you ask Black America, we're white people. But if you ask white America, we're not really white people. Kerwin and I have had this conversation. You know, when you walk into a room, everyone knows you're Black. And that's right there, patent in front of everybody. I walk into a room, and if I'm not wearing my yarmulke, I'm white until they find out that I've deceived them, because I made it look like I was one of them, you know, infiltrating. It's ignorance and fear at its highest, and it plays out in horrific ways. Our former president was given lots of credit for his love of Jews. His daughter, you know, was Jewish, and grandchildren are Jewish, and yet he issued an executive order a couple of years ago because the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of '64 didn't include religion as a protected class. So he was going to fix that. And so discrimination against Jews, anti-Semitism, was fixed by saying, my religion is Jewish, but my race is also Jewish, and my national origin is Jewish. So if I want to be protected under the executive order that President Trump issued, I'm not white, and I'm not an American. And so the old stereotype of dual loyalties, you know, plays itself out from an executive order. And it's whose ox is being gored at the time and who's speaking. When a Black Muslim congresswoman accused us of American Jews of dual loyalty when we brought Bibi Netanyahu over against the will of the sitting president, Barack Obama, the charge of dual loyalties, you know, scapegoated Jews. And then President Trump stands in front of a group of rich white Jews and says, "Your prime minister and your country and your dollars and your influence," and they cheer him on. So, you know, there's racism, but it's not about race. So we're really in no man's land, being set aside in all sorts of ways. And it's targeted specifically at Jews. You know, when John F. Kennedy was running for president, the accusation was that the Vatican would control the government of the United States. And the anti-Catholic sentiment was huge. But the Vatican has lots of power and has lots of money. You know, all that power and money that Jews are credited for having, the Vatican actually has that, okay? And so once Kennedy was elected and the Vatican didn't take over, that anti-Catholic sentiment died away. And yet Catholics are very myopic in their position on homosexuality and on women leadership. And there's not the protests and the discrimination. Within the last decade, the Southern Baptist Convention just affirmed that women are still the property of their husbands, and are now still holding that women do not have the right to hold power, a position of power over a man. And you don't see the anti-Baptists, you know, burning of Baptist churches. The late Reverend Gil Caldwell, may he rest in peace, his last fight was to take the Methodist Church and battle its anti-gay sentiment, which I worked with him on. And again, no one's, you know, burning Methodist churches or you know, because of their anti-gay status. So when you look at what's going on in this world, it's targeted hatred for no apparent reason. And it's the biggest piece, I think, it's just pure ignorance of what we don't know. Jews speak Hebrew, it's a different language. Here's the scary thing that I need to share with people. You know, if you live in Israel and you're a Muslim, you speak Hebrew. If you are Catholic, you speak Hebrew. So Hebrew is not the Jewish language, it's the language of a nation, a political nation. So it's not a secret code that we're sharing secret messages between each other. And it's the same issue that we get with Islamophobia. You know, the word salam and shalom are really the same words, and they mean peace or wholeness. And Islam, they use it really is to mean surrender. Well, it's not surrender politically. The best way I've heard it described is if you are a surfer, you surrender to the wave, you ride the wave, and it is the guide. And so they ride God's will. And it's not, which is peaceful and wholeness. In our Jewish tradition, people don't understand. Our messianic view is about healing for the whole world, not just Jews. There's a wonderful story about the Exodus, and when Israel's crossing the sea and Pharaoh's chariots are following them, and God causes the waters to crash over the Pharaoh's chariots and armies, and the angels are dancing because Israel's free. Your children, they say, are free to God, and God's crying, and God says, the Egyptians are my children too. On Rosh Hashanah, when we blow the shofar, the ram's horn, there's a whole piece of our tradition that argues one of the blasts of the shofar is for all of the mothers whose children have died at war, not just Jewish mothers, but all of the mothers who have died because of war. So we really have to figure out how to learn and listen to and with each other to get past the headlines that cause us to fear and to hate and to misunderstand.
Thank you, Marc, so much. Rabbi Kline, my apologies.
Marc's fine.
Our final introduction or panelist, we are going to bring on the library's own Linda Hewitt. And the reason that I cajoled Linda to speak is because she has some experiences and some thoughts that I'll just let her speak, and then we'll go from there. Linda?
Okay. So this is a little personal tonight, but it's actually why I originally wanted to start this program so much. I didn't want to just talk about race. I wanted to talk about religion. I wanted to talk about minorities. Because of my background, I don't get it. First of all, we say Jews, and everybody's supposed to be the same, you know? We're all different, whether we're Jewish, whether we're Black, whether we're, there's always this brush that everybody that's Jewish is the same. I had a very dear friend, her father was a rabbi, quite an important rabbi in New York, actually, and she would always talk about the Syrian Jews. And one day I said to her, your dad's a rabbi. How could you talk like this? And she's like, oh, well, they're not Jews. And oh no, they're not the same as Jews. And that kind of thinking has been something I've heard my whole life. When Rabbi Kline talked about the incident his daughter had, I had a really dear friend. At the beginning of my career, I worked for McDonald's, and there was a man, Larry Weissman, who worked in the Bloomfield office, and he was transferred to Ohio. I think it was Columbus at the time. And actually, when they moved in the neighborhood, his wife, who was one of the loveliest people you could ever meet, she had two ladies knock on the door, and they wanted to meet her because they heard they were Jewish. And they had never met anyone Jewish. And the one woman actually said to her, well, you seem like a normal person. And so that was another incident. So another incident was with my son, my oldest son. I happen to live in a town, it's West Long Branch, and a lot of Italians actually live in my town. And a lot of things my children have shared with me now that they're adults that were said against, especially against Blacks and Jews, that I just can't imagine my neighbors would think. But when he was 6 years old, we were driving in West Long Branch, and he said to me, oh, we're in Jewville. And I stopped the car and I said, what did you say? And he's like, oh, Jewville. And so I explained to him that, I actually was partly Jewish and that he was partly Jewish. And this just horrified him. He couldn't believe that, he actually dismissed the whole idea. And so as far as my history goes, my father actually was Jewish, born in Atlantic County, and my mother was very waspy from Sussex County. And she went down to Atlantic County, met my father. They decided to marry. My grandmother, her first husband died, had 4 boys, none of whom were bar mitzvahed. Married her second husband while they were off in, actually at war and things, and became an Orthodox Jew. Her first husband was also Jewish. And my mother said her wedding day was one of the saddest days of her life because no one from my father's wedding came and no one acknowledged I was born. So actually, I even though I was half Jewish, I think I was anti-Semitic, to tell you the truth, when I was growing up, because my dad's family had heard my mom's family, and I was like holier than thou in the Methodist church. I was in choir, I was in youth group, but I kept seeing that religion could divide people. Like you have people like Rabbi Kline, who does so many amazing things for his community, but some religious leaders actually divide the community. So I started to realize that, not all religious leaders were alike and how they could bring a community together, actually. So anyway, this is why I was asked to come to this, because I would tell you that, like, during my young years, I'd wear that cross and show everybody that, I was a Christian. So they wouldn't think that I had religious blood. And it wasn't until my teenage years that I actually changed. And then I also began to see, because I came from a very white community, went to Atlantic City High School, which had all kinds of racial riots. So I also began to see that divisiveness. And these things made me think about humanity and why, if we're so religious and if we're so good, why can't we just get along with one another? So that's why I was asked to speak tonight. I've heard, because my name changed from Feldman when everybody would ask why I was in school when it was a Jewish holiday. Everybody in Margate pretty much was Catholic or Jewish. The Protestants were actually a minority. But then when I got married, my name changed to Hewitt, and everybody thought that I was Christian. So they felt free to say these anti-Semitic things in front of me, in front of my children, all these years, not knowing the background. So I ask you to go forward in life. You never know someone's background, and be sensitive of that. Be sensitive the fact that we're all people, and hopefully our mission's all the same, to care about one another and not close people out because their religion might be different than yours. Maybe they think just the same. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Linda. So I'm going to try to spotlight all of our guests so that as we have this conversation, we can see each other and our audience can see us. And so the first question I want to pose to each of you, just real brief, what does success look like from this program for the 40 or so people who are here listening? What would a successful program, what would an outcome be for you guys? And I'll start with Rabbi Bergson, and then Rabbi Kline, and then Linda.
I guess every Zoom meeting has to have somebody who forgets to unmute. I would like to see people walk away thinking differently about what it means to stereotype that, as Linda and Rabbi Kline said quite eloquently, every person is different. You can't people aren't all the same. You can't say Black people do this and Chinese people do that. There are individuals, and I hope that people will think to look beneath the surface when it comes to any ethnic, race, religious group, and not have stereotypes.
Thank you. Rabbi Kline?
I agree with that, but I think my primary hope is that we'll have more conversations and there'll be more intention in learning more about each other. Tonight, we're talking about anti-Semitism, but there's Islamophobia, there's racism, there's, anti-LGBTQ. There's a lot of oppression happening right now. And I would argue that the conversation in this country is only further dividing us. And so we have to remember that we're human beings first, and that there's no one piece of our label that defines us. And yet we pigeonhole people based on our fear or ignorance of what that label may mean. Judaism's not a race. There are white Jews, Black Jews, Hispanic Jews, Asian Jews, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, you can convert in and out, which you can't do racially. There's nothing I could do to convert my race, whatever the president may say. So, the hope is that people will start asking more questions and seeking people out. I have no problem being approached when someone says, I don't understand, let's talk. And there is no question that's too ignorant if it's asked seeking information. So no one has to fear, what will they think if I ask this question? But it begins with remembering that we're human first, and all of us can be labeled in some way that will alienate us from another human being if we allow that. And that's ungodly. And if I might, I would argue that today religion is probably more of a deterrent from respecting human being than anything else, because we're marching to the orders and the dogmas of our denominations, even while they teach a segregation and a separation from people who wear different labels. And so we have to return to faith first, which transcends all of that.
Good. Thank you. Linda, what is success after tonight?
Well, I would like to see anti-Semitism not growing at the rate it is. I'd like people to, do a little bit of reading. It concerns me. This is not just our country. I was in France maybe 3 years ago. I definitely saw not just an anti-Muslim feeling, but an anti-Semitic feeling. I think that, this whole thing of the Holocaust never happened, and I see it locally. Jared Kushner's buying up a lot of land in Long Branch and supposedly closing down Monmouth Medical. So, people are saying, oh, look at what the Jews are doing. And, there's more conversation that I feel people are comfortable saying now. They're more upfront with their anti-Semitic feeling. I just would like to see less of it instead of more, and like the whole world to come together. I think that Rabbi Kline said it so eloquently. It's all races, it's all cultures. It's instead of celebrating each other, we vilify one another. And hopefully, if we, one thing we try to do with this program is have actions of how to change your behavior. Obviously, as a librarian, I always believe you should read. There are great authors. Read about, things that have happened, not just in our country, but in other countries. Read Jewish authors. Don't let people say things like the Holocaust never happened, with at least saying something. But I do think this is growing. And that's why I think that this doesn't warrant just one conversation. There are many so many conversations that we
Yeah.
could have.
Awesome. That's a good lead in. And I'll say this for those who are in attendance, this topic that we're talking about, anti-Semitism, we want to get a handle on what anti-Semitism is, how it shows up, the different manifestations of it, things that we can do about it. And so what I want to lay out at the outset is there are a couple of different conversations that we can have that sort of weave together, but we're going to try our best to separate two big topics, and there'll be programs. We think that each one would warrant its own program. So anti-Semitism, learning about it, understanding it, seeing it, addressing it, this is one program. Now, one of the things that, as Rabbi Bergson said, that anti-Semitism goes back a while. But one of the things that has been fueling it lately is partially the conflict in the Middle East. So I want to lay on the table right now that we recognize that there is some connection and overlap. We aren't going to really dig into the conflict on tonight's program. This one is mainly about anti-Semitism and what we can do to learn and grow together. There'll be another program, a later program, where we're actually going to try to arrange a helpful conversation around the issue. And we've already been talking to a couple of different people. And so if you have questions that sort of kind of touch on that, our panelists may answer at it, but if they don't go in depth, please don't be disappointed or discouraged. Just look for the program that we'll do on that so that we can go further in depth. First question I want to ask, and it's in the chat, Rabbi Kline, this one is to you. Can you talk more about Judaism's task to heal the world?
Absolutely, but Kerm, before I do that, and I've said this to you before, and you know I love you, but having to make the statement that you just made is anti-Semitic.
Okay, help me understand.
The fact that you would have to separate Jewish people from the government of Israel in an intentional separation is already a sense that there's a tie between whatever Israel has or has not done and all of Judaism. So the fact that there is a sentiment that those two are intertwined and somehow is already anti-Semitic. All right. But I understand why you had to give the warning.
Okay.
But they really, one should never be brought up in the other any more than you are responsible for what happens in Zimbabwe because you are Black.
Okay, so it seems like then that people can accidentally walk into anti-Semitism without even knowing it.
Well, it's not an accident. It's been programmed into the conversation. It's part of the tenor of what happens, and it's where blood libels come from. That people who are smart, intelligent people really believe that we're killing Christian children and drinking their blood or making our matzah with their blood. Now, intelligent people will buy into this. No different, at the risk of being really political, that what happened on January 6th was tourism. And then you wonder why people hate American tourists. If what happened there is tourism, then you got to wonder, gee, it's no brainer that we're as Americans are not welcome as tourists anywhere in the world, if that's what we do as tourists. Okay.
Okay.
So there's the problem. But part of healing the world is bringing light to the conversations that are necessary to have. There's a teaching, Litakein Ta'olam. It's in the mystical teaching of our tradition. Here's the nutshell version of where that comes from. Rabbi Isaac Luria, medieval sage, taught that God created this pure vessel of light, just pure light, and tried inserting it into an already full universe, and the vessel of light shattered. And God wanted to repair that vessel of light and needed to animate the shards that were splintered all over the place. And we are those animated shards, not Jews, but people. But it's a piece of our teaching that our job as human beings is to restore that vessel of pure light. And so that can't happen if it's only about Jews. That can't happen if it's only Jews doing it. That's why from the very beginnings of all of our teachings in our Jewish tradition, you have to be relevant in the community. So the Talmud, 5th century, Dina de Malchuta Dina, the law of the land you live in is the law you live by, which means being a relevant, good citizen in whatever country you live in is the most important piece about being Jewish. It's not assimilation. It's about figuring out how to maintain your faith and your focus, even while participating actively in the world around you. And so there is no ethos to the Jewish tradition that doesn't stem from that precept. Do all Jews understand that? No, any more than all Christians understand everything about Christ or. But all of Judaism comes from this notion that, as Ezekiel put it, the sticks of one people in one hand, the sticks of another people in another hand, and humanity heals when that bundle is brought back together. So that's the work that we do.
Thank you. Rabbi Bergson, would you like to add anything onto that, or want me to go to the next?
We are talking about healing the world. I think that Jews are very fixed on action rather than thought. That if those of you who are old enough to remember when Jimmy Carter said he sinned because he lusted in his heart. In Judaism, what matters is not what you're thinking, but what you're doing. It's very much an action religion. And I think that the reason that, I'm a hospice chaplain, and I often get asked about what happens after we die. And mostly Christians are pretty sure about what happens after you die. And Jews are not, because Judaism really focuses on this world. It's the next world. We certainly do believe in an afterlife, but it's not very well, it's not a theology. And I think the general attitude, I would say, is that our job is to make this world a better place than it was when we got here. And we let God worry about what happens next.
Thank you.
Kerwin, I have a question from Walter Greason. Can you say that? Can we discuss the origins of the idea of dysphoria? The ethnic
Diaspora.
Yeah.
The ethnic, cultural, and linguistic diversity of Jewish people is a major point of confusion in the United States.
It is all over the world. And one of the greatest pieces of confusion is that we're not Semites.
I know. So it shouldn't be anti-Semitism.
Semites are people who come from the Middle East.
Yeah.
And most Jews have no ties to the Middle East biologically. In fact, most of the world Jewry today, it comes from Russia and North Asia, and migrates through Poland. I would say that I read a statistic that something like 90% of Jews today have ties to Poland. So problem number one is this whole issue of Semitism and what it is. The other piece is that, again, it's not a race, and so there is no one culture. And Ashkenazic Eastern European Jews do Judaism very differently than the Sephardim, who are the Western European Jews, than the Moroccan Jews, than Ethiopian Jews, because of when they left at the destruction of the first temple. What they call their Torah is only a piece of what ends up being the Torah, which continues on through the Second Temple period. So the ethos of a God and this idea of healing the world is uniform to all. But so we talk about diaspora, we understand that to mean living outside the land, but that's a spiritual context more than a geographic or physical context. When we talk about rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem, there is certainly a part of the Jewish world that wants a new structure built there. But concurrent with the time when the second temple is standing, Philo, who was the leader of the Alexandrian Jewish community, said the third temple is the altar of the soul. And so we had to build a third temple, meaning that each of us had to be prepared to sacrifice our loyalty to faith and to justice and everything, with the fibers of our being. So Walter is 100% correct that it's confusing because it's using terminology that I'm not sure is well placed to begin with, but everybody is just accepted. And so it's like saying to a Black American, go back to your country. How many generations, does it take to live somewhere? In the South, when I was in South Carolina, you weren't a resident of Florence if you didn't have 6 generations in the cemetery. 5 generations, you were not a South Carolinian. So,
wow. So thank you for that, Mark. And I think the confusion about a lot of things, and probably it has to do with, there are people who are telling the story who are not Jewish or don't know the history, or and so I want to go back to this notion that what did you say, that we've been trained or programmed, right? So Rabbi Bergson, you did the history for us. And when Linda was saying her part, she said, when I was younger, I thought I was anti-Semitic because I wasn't proud of being Jewish. Is that anti-Semitism? And is there a structure that is trying to cause this confusion so that there's strife and calamity in the world, from your perspective?
I think there's a real spectrum that there's some anti-Semitism that is unmistakably anti-Semitic when you have people with tiki torches marching through Charlottesville, Virginia, saying Jews will not replace us. That's pretty blatant anti-Semitism. Walking into a synagogue and killing 11 people at prayer, that's blatant anti-Semitism. But there's a very fine line on the other end of the spectrum where if I say, I disagree with Rabbi Kline that it is anti-Semitic to lump anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism together, because I think that because are Jews a race or a nation or an ethnicity or a religion? And there is a modern state of Israel, but there's also a biblical Israel, and there's an Israel of the mind that the story of the Exodus from Egypt is one of escape from oppression with the help of God. And that is something that a great many people identify with. The pilgrims who left England to come on the Mayflower to the Americas considered themselves the Israelites escaping from the Egyptians. You look at the Black spirituals that came out of slavery with Go Down Moses and all of those kinds of things. It's a very moving and gripping story. So a lot of people can identify with that. So you've got Israel, the modern country, and you've got Israel, the biblical and historical shining star. And it's very different for all the centuries and centuries that the Jewish people were homeless and in the diaspora all over the world. They didn't have to do anything that people who run a state do. And when you actually have a country to run, it's a whole different story. So I do think that there are interfaces that are valid. You want to fight, Marc?
We have so much in the chat. We have no time for fighting. So
I like fighting, Linda. I think this might be a good one.
no.
I actually think that we're saying really the same thing from two different perspectives, though. So it's not really a fight. We'll have to find something else to fight over.
Yeah.
All right, so
Could I, Corey Bookman asked us this. Corey, I don't know if you want to ask, or her question is, do you think anti-Semitism is more predominant in any particular political group or part of the spectrum, or does it transcend politics?
I'll take that with the, I have to be fully transparent. That's my oldest child
Okay.
and the mother of my grandson.
Corey, the
Um,
last time I saw you, you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
hey, Mark, can we let Rabbi Bergson start with that, since you have a
Absolutely.
familial connection?
That's why I just said, let Leslie, Rabbi Bergson start, and then I'll come back to
Okay.
it.
Okay. I think it's all across the spectrum. There, is Corey talking about the political spectrum? Because
Yes.
I think there's anti-Semitism on the right and there's anti-Semitism on the left. And I think that's especially the anti-Semitism on the left is difficult. I worked in academia for 14 years. I was a university chaplain at the Claremont colleges. I left there in 2008, and there was already a great deal of anti-Israel sentiment on campus. And it was, if anybody chose to identify with the Jewish groups on campus, and we're talking about people who come to college when they're 18 years old and came maybe out of a sheltered background, maybe had a active Jewish life growing up, and it was a natural thing to seek out the Jewish organizations on campus, or people who knew they were Jewish and that's about all they knew, and they come out of curiosity to find out more. And all you have to do is identify with a Jewish organization, and you've got people in your classes calling you a racist and an oppressor and a supporter of Israel, when you may know very little about Israel. So no, in brief, I would say it's all across the spectrum.
I would concur, but I would go a little bit further, that, and I think I'm going to bring in Connie Goddard's question into this as well. Intersectionality is a huge issue. We're both oppressed, so we're going to hate each other's oppressors. We don't know anything about your oppressor, but because you're oppressed, we're going to do this, and that's run rampant. I'm amazed at how much of Black America has no idea the role Jews played in the civil rights movement. Kerwin, you and I have talked about this with many local pastors who, until I could show proof, had no idea. The sad truth is there's a ton of Jews who have no idea that Jews played a role in the civil rights movement in America either. And so ignorance, and this is something we keep going back to, ignorance feeds the discrimination and the fear and all of that. And ignorance is not unique to one side of the political spectrum or the other. And the ignorance is not due to, or not unique to, people who are uneducated. It's people who are uneducated beyond their myopia. So very successful people in the business world don't understand and don't know. I went to law school in University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and I had card-carrying members of the Ku Klux Klan in my law school class. Now, these are lawyers who are taking constitutional law, who don't understand the problem of racism. And the fact that it's taught and becomes part of the conversation, this is no different than the problem we have with white privilege. Most white people don't understand that they participate in systemic racism. And it's not that they're bad people. It's just beyond the spectrum of their knowledge base. And so they say things and do things that feed the problem. For Judaism, the number of people who have used the term, I Jewed him down, without realizing
Right.
how horrific that is. And then when you mention it to them, it's, oh my God, I had no idea. And you want to say, how could you not understand? There's a teaching from the rabbis, do your ears hear what your mouth is saying? Okay. And the answer is no, most of the time. We just repeat what we've been taught. And again, that's not unique to the left or to the right. That is part of the failure of the human condition. I would argue part of the failure of religion, and I'm going to argue the failure in our current system of education, where we don't teach people to think, we teach people to pass tests so schools can get funded.
Yep.
Okay, which is another conversation, but the place where you're supposed to get the educational foundation to be able to make competent decisions in the real world is teaching you to be only programmed myopic, because nothing matters other than chucking the right box on the test.
So
and that plays out horrifically across the boundaries.
Yep. So just as a time check, it's 8:05. Our program runs until 8:30. So we have some questions in the chat that we want to get to. Linda, you're about to say something?
I was just going to address one of those. We have one, anti-Semitism. Are you able to shed light on the extent of it here in the US versus other countries, for example, England and India?
So let me get to one that was up earlier.
Prior.
Dan Rosette from the Jewish Federation sent me some information
Sure.
that may answer or get at that question that you just asked. This one was from Ricky Cashton. It's either what or how can all do to get closer and get to know each other? What can we do to learn to walk in each other's shoes? How can we create dialogue or groups focused simply on getting to know, understand, and trust each other, breaking through the differences to our connections? How do we get started? That's one. And then the second one sort of dovetails also. This is Madeline. How do you open a conversation with youth or adolescents about race and racial inequality within the framework of your profession? So how do we start to get to see each other as human and walking in each other's shoes? And then how do we talk to young people, adolescents, about it? Let's go with Rabbi Bergson first.
Okay, my constituency as a hospice chaplain doesn't usually include a whole lot of youth and teens, but as I said, I was a college chaplain for a long time, and this was something that the Office of the Chaplains did a great deal. We were often called in to small groups of students when there had been some kind of an incident. For instance, at one of the colleges, there was a young woman from I can't remember exactly what her culture was, but it was one in which she was going to be in an arranged marriage, and her dorm mates were laughing at her and telling her how oppressed she was by her parents, and that they're choosing who you're going to marry. And privately, before we met with them, I said to my fellow chaplains, considering the kind of choices they make, they might be better off if their parents made the choice for them. But what I think the best way to go about it, and it has to be done very deliberately. This is not something that just naturally happens. When you're having surface dialogue with people, there's not an opportunity for these kinds of things to be spoken about. I think you need small groups of diverse people with someone moderating who can direct the conversation. And you need to be able to open up your heart and talk about how you have been affected by discrimination of all different kinds, and be willing to listen to what other people have to say without being defensive.
Marc?
Yeah, this is where this conversation really began. It requires us to really become uncomfortable in our own shoes when we see someone else hurting. And there's a famous poem, Pastor Martin Niemöller from World War II, when they came for the trade unionists, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. When they came for the communists, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. When they came for the Jews, I didn't speak up. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak. And so we don't get involved until somehow it lands in our backyard without realizing it's already in our backyard, because if it's happening to someone, the slippery slope is you're next. So we have to become aware that if someone's hurting, that we have to at least hear why and what with an open heart. So when there was rampant violence against Jews in this country, I called a couple of my friends, Pastor Kerwin Webb included, and said, guys, where are you? You know, I show up, and I brought Juneteenth to this area, you know, and I said, where are you? And the blessing is everyone responded yes, and has been there since, and spawning this and several other type conversations. But especially if we are suffering oppression in our realm, we're not paying attention to somebody else's, unless they're, again, the intersectionality brings us somehow together. So where does it begin? It begins with these conversations. It begins with going and if we know that people are crying out, don't wait for them to come to you. Let's go and find out proactively what's going on. You know, as people of faith, whatever the religious tradition, we have an obligation in faith to help other people who are hurting. And even if we don't agree on things, that's not what this is about. It's about going back to a place where, as human beings, we need to take care of each other. And what we'll find is that politically, if we respond to each other's humanity, we'll find that our political answers really end up being not very far apart. We may see things through different lenses, but I don't know that anybody in this fight would say, I really don't want what's best. We just have to expand our boundaries of what that best really means for more people. And so I think this conversation is great, unless we sign off of this and everyone said, great, I attended a session on anti-Semitism and check that one off the list.
Yeah. Linda, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, supposedly our area geographically where we live is, you know, friendlier to people that are Jewish, you know, the coast supposedly, but you go to other parts of the country and anti-Semitism is definitely growing even more than ever. So
with respect, Linda,
you
it was 2 years ago that anti-Jewish flyers purportedly from the Klan spread throughout Red Bank. That I created the No Hate at Home program with Hackensack Meridian. It's latent here. It may be patent in other places, but as you brought up, the fact that Jared Kushner is buying up property, it's the Jews.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It definitely. I mean, I'm hearing so much talk from contractors like in Monmouth Beach and you know, they put everybody together and it's like they don't want to do work. They don't want to work with the Jews.
And
they're not getting paid and so things are definitely becoming more anti-Semitic.
Let me share some of this information. Dan Rosette at the Jewish Federation sent it, and it has some stats on anti-Semitism. Let me pull it up, and then it might speak to some of let's see, here we go. So he used FBI hate crime reports, and the part, so 60.2% of the 1,715 victims of anti-religious hate crimes, 60% of them were motivated by the offender's anti-Jewish bias. So anti-Jewish bias causes hate crimes at 60%, which is the most of religious, anti-religious hate crimes. These are the breakdowns from the Office of the Attorney General. And one of the things is that even though from 2019, looking at anti-Jewish bias, 2019, 345, 2020, 298, that's going up. And that's one of the reasons for this panel and some of the others, because even though it was going down, it's still a big problem. As we can see, you know, these numbers are just incredible as the rise has happened. So these are different incidences that are just in our area. And I'll check with Dan to make sure, and if he's okay with it, I'll send this out. And Linda, you may, if the attendees want to have this information, if Dan is okay with it, we can share it.
I mean, according to that, it says New Jersey was #2 in the country. I wonder who #1 was, but #2.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like East Coast, a lot.
Yeah, forget that.
Now the one for, let's see. So this one is people in the world who harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. So this number was surveyed, and out of all of those people, this many in the world, 1,600,000, 1 billion people harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. And it has to do, I'm guessing, with what Rabbi Kline said, that we're trained this way. The conversation that he and I had that sort of sparked when he called and said, "Where are you guys at?" My response to him was, "You know what? I didn't know, I didn't see it." And he said, "That's right, because that's how it's designed, for you not to see." And what I heard from him and what I felt from him was the way that our country has shaped us to think that if it is a Jewish problem, if it is Jews that have the problem, it's not a big deal. They're just the Jews, right? Because they're seemingly everybody's punching bag except the Black person, right? Like you have the Black people, then you have Jews, but it is largely, people are largely ignorant. And I will say that I am about things, because Rabbi Kline and I have had many conversations. He was like, "So, you know, I love you, right? But that right there is anti-Semitic." And I'm like, "What did I say?" But it's because I have not been exposed. I have not, you know, been in those small groups where I'm learning about the different ways. And so that's why we are bringing this program, and we want to highlight this. And I'm looking at the time, and I feel like we haven't even done a good job with the time. Rabbi Bergson.
Can I just add one thing to that? Is when I was at Claremont, there was a student at one of the two-year colleges, one of the community colleges nearby, and he loved doing programs with religious leaders, trying to do interfaith programming. And at one of them, there had recently been some action adventure movie that started. The way the movie started was with a bunch of Arab men blowing stuff up. And somebody asked the imam on the panel, "Did you find that offensive?" And he said, "Well, of course I found it offensive, and I'm going to find a lot of other, like I found a lot of other things offensive in the past, and like I will in the future." He said, "But when I start finding the anti-Semitic stuff offensive, and when the Christians start finding the Jewish stuff offensive, that's when things are actually going to change." And I think of that, and wonder and hope that I'm doing my part to understand and to speak out when there's any kind of discrimination.
Awesome, thank you. So, like I said, I'm cognizant of time. It is 8:18. We do have to leave a little room at the end for last minute statements and announcements from the library. There's questions in the chat about the report, sending it out. Yes, I will send that information to Linda, who has the email registration. She can forward that out. Richie asked, can we think about anti-Jewish oppression, anti-Semitism, and the importance of working to be good allies to the Jews? We as white people can work on our racism and on becoming good allies to Black people. And yes, it's important for us to think about Blacks and Jews being allies for each other. I think that's Rabbi Kline's whole thing. Like, the history that we don't know is that we were a united group because we're both oppressed groups. My concern is that the educational system that Rabbi Kline talked about is working exactly the way it's supposed to, dividing people, so that we won't work together to overcome these issues. But stay tuned to programs like these and just the different work that Rabbi Kline does, the library does, and other organizations and groups, so that we can continue changing society. Linda, Patty, do you guys want to take more questions, or how do you see it?
Is there anybody else that has anything to say? I do want to say that, though, people like Rabbi Bergson and Rabbi Kline, though, how they're bringing communities together is the most important thing. I mean, that's what we need in all our communities. We need all of our religious, like I realized one of the places in town, it was a church with whom I was working, and everything was great until I wanted to do a program on, gay lesbian issues. And then suddenly I was told, well, I had to understand why that person who was a big religious leader in our community couldn't support that. Well, I find that hard to understand. I think, I want organizations that bring us all together. And, Rabbi, I know Rabbi Kline, you're the real deal there. And I know Carwen, that you also. So that's what we need more of. We need more people like you who really.
Linda, thank you for that. I'm going to point to what we would call in Hebrew, Gedolei Hador, great of the generation, and that was Gil Caldwell.
Oh, for sure.
Reverend Caldwell, who was the first Black United Methodist district minister in the history of the Methodist Church. And when he reached that pinnacle and brought down that ceiling, he then turned around, and that's when he first realized that discrimination was discrimination.
Right.
And he took a position which he served for the rest of his career on the National PFLAG Board, and which alienated him from many of his Black ministerial colleagues.
And this in his 80s he was doing. He was part of our committee. I mean, this is a man that when he should have been sitting in the rocking chair, he was, fighting with fellow ministers.
He had Seder at my house. I dearly love that man, and work with Dale now, his son. But just with that understanding that education happens in both ways. T.J. Leiden was a neo-Nazi and married a more fervent neo-Nazi. They have a son, and when that son is 3 years old, the son is looking at the television screaming the N-word at the TV. And TJ said, wait, I know why I hate Black people, but the only reason my son would hate Black people is because I taught him to. With that, he left the skinheads, divorced his wife, got custody of his son, and now tours the country for the Wiesenthal Center, talking about the problem with neo-Nazism and that. So we teach racism, we teach anti-whatever, but there's also the opportunity at any point in our life to have that eye-opening experience to say, no, I don't think so. And that only happens if we're willing to open our eyes beyond our own stuff.
Rabbi Bergson, would you like to give closing remarks and Rabbi Kline really quickly. Then we'll do Linda and Patty, or Patty and Linda, however their order is. But Rabbi Bergson, you first.
I always welcome the opportunity to have conversations about uncomfortable subjects, and this has been wonderful. And I only found out about this group because Rabbi Kline invited me to be on the panel, and I would very much like to be a part of future conversations.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome, thank you.
Wonderful.
Rabbi Kline.
My thoughts are just to thank everyone for being here and hope that you will continue to be here and seek out the opportunities to ask questions of people you don't understand, you don't know, and to remember that learning is the path of faith. You cannot be a faithful person if you've shut your mind to something new and something possible.
Awesome. Before we get to Linda and Patty, Dr. Grayson, he asked for a special second to make an announcement. Dr. Grayson?
Thanks so much. This is just a beautiful night to share together and grow as we learn about anti-Semitism and the ways we can work together to dismantle it, not just in our personal lives, but in our institutional behaviors. On a separate but related topic, there's a huge breakthrough that has happened in the last month that I thought the group here, knowing everyone, I thought you might share my joy. I'm going to put the link in the chat that in Morris County, a month ago, we uncovered a couple of relics that we had been struggling to document and uncover for several decades. These are shackles from a plantation where we have a definitive set of artifacts about enslavement in New Jersey prior to 1800. And so we have a lot of paper records. We're compiling a lot of digital archives, but there's just something different about seeing the metal and understanding that these were put on someone's hands and feet, and they were bound and forced to work to build our state. And so it's a huge monumental find, and we're going to be dealing with the implications of it for years to come. But I wanted to make sure I shared that tonight, that we've come so far, and yet we still have so much further to go. But I'm always inspired by all of you coming together and having these conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Grayson. One more shameless plug before I turn it back over. The T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center, which Dr. Grayson is a part of and I am as well, Red Bank Library, we're part of a coalition, the New Jersey Social Justice Remembrance Coalition. And that group is working to document, bring remembrance and document the lynching that happened in Eatontown in 1886. Samuel Johnson, Mingo Jack, was lynched in Eatontown in 1886. And a group of about, I think it's about maybe 15 organizations now. Oh yeah, Rabbi Kline's on there too. I'm sorry, I did not mean to forget you. He's gonna let me know about that later. But we are in the process of doing educational events to bring awareness to race and racism in this country, to help tell the more complete story of our country's history. We invite you to go to the Red Bank NAACP's website to find more information. We have our coalition meetings on the 4th Thursday of each month. If anybody wants information or has questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, because we are in the process of doing our work. We have a high school essay contest that's part of it, a soil collection project, historical marker installation, and a dedication ceremony. And from now up until June of 2022, we'll be doing different educational events to bring awareness to the different issues of race, racism, and racial terror in the country. So that's a shameless plug for the work that we are doing. And we invite you to join us, learn about it, support us as we go. Patty, Linda, I'm done now, so you guys can have it.
Yeah, I just want to say one of the questions had been, how do we talk to our children about, discrimination, racial issues? One of the biggest things is to talk to your children about this and read books together. Sierra Williams, our children's librarian, talk about plugs, but I really do want to plug her diversity program that she does for families once a month with young children. It's fabulous. And I think it's really important to have these conversations with your children, and really at a young age. Because as what happened with my son, by the time he was 6 years old, he was hearing things in school. If you're not talking to your children, they're hearing things in the community, and maybe they're not necessarily things you want them to have as their values. So read to them, talk to them, and talk about all people to them. And that's all I want to say. Patty, you want to finish up?
Yes, thank you. This was, as always, a wonderful program. Thank you so much, Rabbi Kline, Rabbi Bergson. Oops, sorry, my phone is ringing in the room. It's been off all night. Anyway, I would like to make a plug for this program because we, in next month, in August, we're celebrating 6 years of doing Let's Talk About Race every month, except for maybe a couple of months. We actually had Rabbi Kline scheduled to do this program last year in, I want to say April, and then COVID happened and everything got sidelined. So thank you both so much for coming tonight. Our next program will be August 25th, and we plan to address the subject of reparations. We're still finalizing the presenters and the details, but it's always the last Wednesday of the month, and you'll be hearing more about this. And as I said, it's the 6th anniversary, 6 years since Linda initiated Let's Talk About Race on behalf of the Red Bank Library. And also just to recognize our committee members who volunteered to put this program together. Kerwin Webb, Walter Grayson's on our committee, Claire Phelps, myself, and of course, Linda. And there's a couple of other folks who have joined us who couldn't be here tonight. And just to leave you with a couple more thoughts. If you like this program, if you think you'd like to duplicate this in your own community, please reach out to us and we can give you some ideas on how we put it together and what you can do in your own community. We love that you support Red Bank, but this is needed really everywhere we go. If you have ideas for future topics that we can present, please let us know that as well. Remember that you are all now empowered from what you've learned tonight to go out and make a change in your circle. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everybody. If there's nothing else, we thank you for joining us. Look forward to the next program. Be on the lookout for the emails with the anti-Semitism information that Linda will send out. And we hope that you'll join us for our program in August. Everyone, thanks so much. Have a great night. Thank you, Rabbi Kline, Rabbi Bergson, and Linda for sharing. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Night.
Night.